topic I want to talk today about is a topic that affects a lot of, up and coming businesses, a lot of new businesses, startups, and sometimes a lot of big companies, and it's called management myopia. So management myopia is the mindset that you're only focused on short-term and inward results rather than long-term and, things that are going to affect you in a few years rather than right now. The problem with this is that when a lot of companies focus on just this, they don't see the bigger picture that something they could be doing right now could affect them in a negative way in a few months, in a few years, and will ultimately result in their demise. So the big problem with this is that, let's think of a startup company. So they just open up in Brooklyn, and a lot of people are coming in. Their profits are high. The customers seem satisfied. They're building customer loyalty, which isn't really customer loyalty because they just opened. So they say, let's expand. But they just opened a few months ago. So they're willing to expand because they see such high products, and they see a lot of foot traffic. If they expand on such short notice, they will end up resulting in there's going to be some time in the future where they're going to end up at a plateau. Customers come here, and then profits aren't going to keep skyrocketing. They're going to hit a plateau. So when that happens, they might not have the money to cover the the expansion that they did a few months ago. So the problem with that is when they hit a plateau and they did an expand, they're going to be in debt. With a lot of new businesses, it's a new face in town, it's a new business, maybe new merchandise. Obviously there's going to be a lot of business. So you can't obviously focus on the few months, the first few weeks, or even sometimes the first few years of your profits and make rash decisions that are going to get you in debt and going to cost a lot of money and probably going to affect you negatively in the future. With the companies that succeed are the companies that wait out until they hit, sometimes it's a 5-year mark. For restaurants, I know I've heard a lot, it's a 5-year mark, that after 5 years, if your company is still doing as good as it is when it first opened, then you have something good on your hands, and then you can proceed into, expanding, adding new merchandise, maybe adding a market, maybe selling merchandise, but until then, just keep it at what your original plan was, and it was a small restaurant. Continuing with the topic of a store opening up or expanding into a market or a place that sells merchandise, a lot of companies think that this is what the customer needs and or wants, but you really have to think about that in depth rather than saying, oh, we have a lot of profit, we have all this extra money, let's just expand and make ourselves in so much debt, which ultimately might not be what the customer needs. And this new expansion, this new location, these added benefits maybe aren't going to bring any more customers in. Maybe once it's going to bring something in because it's a new place, but it might not match the restaurant's profit. The problem with this is that most companies think about the short term, and they think more about the company is so good right now, so we might as well keep growing. But is growing really what the consumer needs and wants? In a city like New York, there's so many markets and there's so much places that sell merchandise that there's so much competition, and a restaurant might not need that on top of already, restaurant competition. So when a company decides to do this, they need to take into account the fact that this isn't probably not going to match the profits that they saw when they opened up the new restaurant, and they're probably going to end up losing money because of the the cost, the merchandise that they're selling, the food that they're bringing into the markets above, like on top of the rent, the added employees. Is it really going to cover the cost? The restaurant might be covering the cost because there's always new restaurants popping up here and there, but it's harder to keep a store and a market up and running than it is for a restaurant, because people are always eating, but people are not always spending money on merchandise, and people are not always spending money buying organic food, homegrown food, which is probably what this restaurant would have. So this company needs to think about that, and needs to think about more long-term and specifically more consumer needs rather than what the company needs, because sometimes the company needs are largely affected by if a consumer wants or not. because a company might want to expand, might become a franchise, but if it's not getting enough publicity and enough profit from the consumer, then there really isn't any point, because they're just going to fail at it. So in conclusion, management myopia literally has to do with the fact that if management staff and the company itself thinks more about what the company needs in a short term. They see that the company is profiting, and they think these are long-term results that are, the consumer is always going to be around. And because of this, they make decisions that will ultimately leave them in debt, or probably worse. So, in order to solve this, companies need to think of strategies and need to think of ways to foreshadow not only the environment that they're in, let's say New York, because it's always changing, rent is always changing, gentrification is always changing. Are they in a neighborhood that is going to give them money? And they also need to think about the consumer and the consumer spending habits, because a restaurant has a 5-year gap, has a 5-year limit. After 5 years, if it's still doing as good as it did at the beginning, then it's a profitable place. But if not, then no chance to expand. So my thing would be to say to restaurants that are starting things like this, I would say wait 5 years and see if after 5 years they're still as profitable as the first few years. And if they are, then go ahead and expand, because this company has made a name for itself and it's reputable. If not, if you see that you have a lot of profits, wait it out, because those profits might not last as long.